And this week's topic for Ramble Rouser is. Oh, let's see if you can see this on the camera. I can't tell. It's hard to try and see it because of the glare. Waifu culture. Oh, this is going to be a fun one. Unlike some of the topics we've had that are more serious, this is going to be a fun one. So, for those who don't understand what I mean, waifu culture is the culture in the larger fandom community that really delves deep into the idea of things like waifus and shipping and all of that kind of jazz. Um, by connection, you can also go with stuff like husbandos and doterus as well. And I'll get into doterus if you don't know what that means either. um, this is something that I've actually seen panels for at conventions. This is stuff that I've actually seen people actively talk about. And I'm no expert, mind you. But I do want to talk about it. That's why I put it as a topic for the hat. um, so, when I first started watching anime and stuff, when I was really, really young, the kind of point where everyone began watching anime in my age range. We started watching like with Toonami, with Dragon Ball Z, or with Pokemon, or Sailor Moon, and all of that jazz. And I watched all of those. Digimon as well, obviously. Um, I grew up with that stuff. Yu-Gi-Oh! When we began watching that stuff, though, no one really like thought about things that way. Like the entire waifu thing hadn't really gotten started. I believe actually the term originally came from Azumanga Daioh. Um, I might be wrong about this, but this is what I've heard. Because I believe the teacher in there at one point says the word "my waifu." I mean, it's just like supposed to be like a like English kind of thing going on where he's like actually supposed to be saying "my wife," but because of like the Japanese accent and stuff, it comes across as being heard as waifu. Um, so people have kind of latched onto it after that, and I'm not even 100% sure when Azumanga Daioh came out. I want to say late '90s, early 2000s. But it was in the like probably late 2000s, early 2010s when that really started to kick off, like more than ever before, at least that I noticed. Um, and it was around 20, when was it, 2012, 2013? Uh, I want to say 2012 when I really started getting back into anime again. 2011 or 2012. It was, I know, like only within the year after I had come back from Georgia, where I was living for a bit, and where I had graduated high school. I came back up here to Michigan, and yeah, I was. I had watched anime here and there, but I had never really like actively got into it. It's like, oh, I would check out a older show every now and again. I would check something out if I was slightly interested, but I was much more at that time into stuff like video games, and I was starting to get into YouTube stuff more around that time as well. Um, well, a little before then, but still, you understand the gist of things. I was really starting to get into YouTube stuff around then. Um, but it was around that time I started to get more into it. My sister and I watched through One Piece, and I had seen a bunch of One Piece before. I would say at that time, from what was released, I'd seen most of what was released already. But my sister hadn't seen any, so we started to watch through it all the way from the beginning. And I believe at that point we had gotten like to just after the time skip. I believe that's what was released at the time. I think there might have been Fishman Island at that point, but I'm not sure. Um, but yeah, we started to watch, and that really kind of got me back into anime. And so I believe it was in 2014 when Sailor Moon Crystal came out. I believe it was 2014. Um, it was it was in the summer season. I know that, and that was the first time I decided to start watching anime actively by season. Um, and from that point, I started watching older shows that I had never seen as well, and just kept watching and watching. Within those years, it's just I became a lot more invested in it. In that time, I also began checking out like the online communities and stuff, and I started hearing all about waifus and whatnot. And it was very easy to understand what they were talking about. Like waifus were those female characters in anime or well, they can be in anything really. But those female characters that you just love, that you just really love as characters, that you really latch onto, that you just really just love. Not necessarily fall in love with, and not even necessarily like anything weird, like imagine having sex with them or anything. No, it's just you love the character. You think they're a fantastic character. You really grow attached to them uh, from a viewership perspective. Yeah. Um, and I mean, there's nothing wrong with necessarily getting a bunch of merch for those kind of characters, or even body pillows and shit, or even looking at hentai and shit, if that's what you're into. But the basic idea is that it's a character, usually a female character for waifus, that you really, really love. And I, of course, had heard about husbandos as well, though those aren't as often talked about. And that's just, it's the same as waifus, just with male characters. Um, People don't often talk about those as much because let's be honest. At least in the communities I've been in, most of the people tend to be male, and most of them tend to be interested in women, whether they're straight, bi, pan, whatever. Um, and even a lot of the females I've seen in the anime community, let's be honest, have shown interest in women, or at least have waifus as well, just from a pure perspective of just loving them as characters. Um, and I've seen just as many guys. I've seen plenty of guys and plenty of girls with husbandos as well. So it's not saying like those don't exist. It's just they're a lot less prevalent in the anime community at large of what I've seen. But yeah, the basic idea behind having a waifu is it's just a character that you love, a character that you love to talk about, that you love to see their goals, their dreams come into fruition. And again, a lot of people within culture tend to really get into the characters to a point of requesting fan art commissions, getting various merchandise such as pins or plushies in some cases, or body pillows, or figurines, pop Funkos, all of those stuff. Um, and that's all great. That's all fantastic. There's legitimately nothing wrong with that. It's just, it's taking part in a culture, supporting artists and creators and all that. And it's awesome. And then eventually I started to hear about shipping as well. Now, shipping is something that I more or less kind of always thought about to a degree, at least as far back as I can remember in terms of anime. It's just like I would watch an anime and I would note that that character and that character feel like they could be a couple. It was something that always just kind of occurred to me, you know? Now, growing up in a very restrictive, honestly bigoted household, most of my early ships, like before I really started getting into the culture and everything, were straight, very straight. It didn't really begin to branch out until I started, well, myself branching out. So, yeah. but not getting into that. Um, the idea of shipping is just it's simple as it sounds. You take two or sometimes more characters if you're into polyamory, but usually two characters from any show or sometimes even multiple shows. Like there has been cross shipping, um, and you just put them together and you imagine them as a couple. And again, this can come out with fan art, with merchandise, all that kind of stuff. Usually it's from the same show because it's usually like people are watching the show and again, like I said, you note that oh, these characters feel like they could be a couple, or that they have these really cute interactions that make me wish they were a couple, or like the idea of it at least. Um, a great example of this from a show that I watched growing up was Ami Mizuno and Makoto from Sailor Moon, or better easily known as Sailor Mercury and Sailor Jupiter. They had fantastic chemistry on screen, and there's even a couple of scenes I think that kind of play around like with the idea. Like there's a scene I believe with them dancing together, and it's like I think out of the various Sailor Scout ships, they're actually one of the more well liked ones, like just generally well liked ones. Uh, I guess you could kind of call it a safe ship. Though I mean, I think Usagi and Rei is a pretty common one too. But the point being is that that was definitely one of the more notable easy ships to get into like earlier on because as I said, when I first started like really getting heavily into anime again in 2020 around 2014, maybe it was 2013, I don't know, whenever Sailor Moon Crystal first started airing. um but yeah, it's like that was what it was. That's what it was all around. That's when I started getting back into it because of Sailor Moon Crystal starting to air. Because again, I had grown up with the original, watching it with my sister and stuff, and so I wanted to see Crystal. I wanted to see the remake and if it did it better in any ways. And in some ways it did, in some ways it didn't, but that's not the point. Um, I still love the characters. Ami was definitely my waifu from the series, Sailor Mercury. She always was, though. She was always my favorite. Um, but going further into anime over the years, it's like it's become more kind of ingrained with me, both waifus and shipping, just the entire culture around it. Um, I've made various like lists of my various waifus ranked from like least to most favorite and stuff. I've made my favorite ranked lists of my favorite waifus from specific shows, my favorite ships and stuff. And I do it all the time, and I think about it all the time now. It's become ingrained as a part of my experience with anime. And even with other stuff, I think about it to a degree. Even with video games, especially dating sims. Those make it a lot easier, though, to be fair. But even non-anime cartoons and all, it's like that stuff is still relevant, and for a lot of fans as well, they think about it too. Like I can't count the amount of times I've heard people call Lapis Lazuli from Steven Universe a waifu. So it's like it's very much ingrained into the culture. Now then, there's the concept of doteru. For those who haven't heard of it, this one isn't talked about as much, and I almost never hear it mentioned in any of the anime groups I'm a part of. But I have heard it mentioned various times at conventions and stuff. And a doteru, to put it very simply, it's the same kind of concept as a waifu, but specifically for a young child female character who, instead of like, oh, you love them and everything, it's like you want to protect them. You want to protect them. You want to keep them safe. You almost have like this motherly instinct, no matter if you're a guy or a girl. I guess you could say a parental instinct, but it's often, let me be honest, attributed towards a motherly instinct for that caring, nurturing kind of thing. Um, which I mean, we do need to break down those barriers. Fathers can be just as caring and nurturing like that too, but still, not getting into that debate today. This isn't the Ramble Rouser for that topic. But yeah, Dotaru would be a character uh, oh, I cannot remember her name, but the little girl from Persona 4, the animation, or I guess just Persona 4 in general. Um, I want to say Nai, or is that the girl from Steins Gate? Either way, the little girl from Persona 4, the little girl from Steins Gate, like the kid. It's like this character who's just so sweet, so innocent, so nice, so just friendly and everything. It's just you want to protect them. You don't want anything bad to happen to them. You just want them to be safe and happy and just have a great life. It's that kind of concept. Um, it's notably different how people would look at a Doteru from a waifu. People do not look at it as the same thing at all, and it's not. Like I said, waifu is more of the kind of thing where it's like, oh, you really love this character, and it's like if this kind of character were real, you would honestly want to be with someone like that. But like with a Dotaru, it's like, oh, you just want to protect them. You want to help them just live and survive and be safe and all. So yeah. Um, and there are people who take things way too far in waifu culture. There are fans who are toxic about it in various ways. There are some fans who will do things like who will demand that no one else can love their waifu. There are people who will even try to uh like use some kind of loopholes and shit to marry their waifu, which is ridiculous and over the top in my opinion. Um there are people who will even attack others for insulting their waifu, even not even just insulting her, but even just saying something that could be seen as an insult. People take it way too far and get a little too attached. And I feel like a lot of these people are probably the kinds of people who get too attached to anime and stuff like that in general because of bad, like regular lives for various purposes. And I'm not going towards any extremes here, but it's like I can imagine with like bad personal lives, bad experiences in romance and stuff, that you could become so attached that it's like whenever you hear someone like bad talking or something, it irritates you in the same way it would if you heard someone trash talking a real life girlfriend or wife or whatever, any kind of partner. But yeah, it's like for me it just feels like it's going a little too far and it's coming across as like, okay, you know these are fictional characters, right? You gotta realize that these characters aren't real. Like I love these characters too. I love Weiss in Ruby, for example. But if I heard someone like shit talking her while like putting up, I don't know, Blake, just as an example, it's like I don't care. It's like it's your opinion. If you like Blake more than Weiss, if you don't like Weiss at all, if you hate Weiss as a character, I won't understand that, but it's your opinion and you're entitled to it. I'm not going to attack you or anything for it. I'm not going to start a fight with you. But there are some people who do that, and I just I don't understand how someone can take it that seriously. You can get into it and everything, but when you take it that seriously, that's a little too much. And collect all the merchandise you want, even if it's an obscene amount. That's all well and good. There is nothing wrong with that. I collect plenty of merchandise myself. Collect all the merchandise you want. That's a honestly a pretty healthy way to handle it. A pretty healthy way to just take part in waifu culture by collecting merch. But by doing shit like that, it's like that's a little ridiculous. And another great way, another healthy way to take part in waifu culture is through cosplay. As long as you again handle it right. And of course you can cosplay as your favorite waifus or whatever, your favorite characters in general. But there's also finding other cosplayers at conventions who who are cosplaying as them. Now, there are, of course, always boundaries because there are some people who think it's okay to touch and get weird just because they like the characters, or if the cosplayer happens to be wearing something that's a little more revealing, some people think it's an invitation. It's not. Cosplay is never consent. Fuck anyone who thinks it is. Um, but again, different rant for different day. But if like you were to go at a convention and see someone dressed up as a waifu and like wanted a picture, you go up to them, you ask if you can get a picture because like you love the character, you think it's a fantastic costume representation. Like that's great. Do that as long as you're polite, as long as you accept if they say no, and as long as you're very not creepy about it. That's a great way to take part in waifu culture as well. Hosting panels at conventions is a fun way too. There's this group of people who host panels at Youmacon every year, um, and they range from a few different topics, but like the entire thing is your blank is trash and stuff, and it's like the idea is like you tell them like your different depending on which panel it is, it can be different things, but one of the ones they do is waifu. Your waifu is trash, so you tell them your favorite waifu, and they'll tell you why that waifu is trash. But there's always a twist. Each of the panelists has their one perfect waifu that if you can guess, you actually win a prize. And I've been to that panel a couple times, and it's a fun panel. And I've seen panels of people like just talking about waifu culture, where it started, how it grew, and everything. And it's really fascinating to see people put this kind of time and energy into these panels for something that's so silly and everything, but it brings us together as well. And that's another big thing about waifu culture that I just really want to touch on here. Waifu culture can bring people together. People can form friendships over mutual waifus, or even over differences of opinions of things. It can help them get to talking about the show or whatever, and they can form a friendship through even a mutual disagreement like that. Just but still that passion and interest. I've had that happen. It's really just interesting to see how this kind of thing has shaped the anime community and how people have just grown closer because of it. It's really fascinating and really interesting. And so many artists have gotten so many more opportunities because of it. Whether they're just doing like, standard art, whether they're making models, whether they're sewing plushes or body pillow covers or whatever else, making pins. Um, all of these artists are getting so many more opportunities because of this shit too, because people latch onto these characters so much. They see like, oh, this character is extremely popular, I should make merch of that character to sell at conventions, and I'll get more money, but I also get to just have fun making this merchandise. And some of these artists make the merchandise even for characters they don't know, but some of these artists, in fact, I say a lot of the artists also love these characters. They also get into these shows and the waifu culture surrounding it. And that's awesome. That's awesome. It's such a great thing to see. So, long story short, waifu culture is a very much more complex thing than you would think. It's more than just the standard, just waifu as a whole. And there are good sides and bad sides to it. Good ways to handle uh, your love for your waifu, and bad ways. And as a big fan of anime, as a big viewer of just media in general, I love to take part in it. I love to love these characters. Characters like Weiss, like Nico Robin from One Piece, like I don't know, Peridot from Steven Universe. I don't know. I love Peridot, so sure. But you get the idea. And it's like I love to take part in all of this too. It's so fun. And that's the big thing about it. Having these waifus, shipping these characters, all of this jazz, going to the conventions, loving the cosplays and the merchandise, it's fun. It brings this sense of just joy and entertainment and amusement. It's like it's all fake, it's kind of silly, but it's fun and it's harmless. And in some ways, it can make people feel just a lot better when their lives aren't going well otherwise. It can kind of act as an escape from the dregs of the real world. So, yeah, I encourage you all practice waifu culture. Love your waifus and daughters. Just ship whoever you want. Just do it safely, do it healthily, and don't be creepy about it. That's all I ask about that. Um and I beg of you, just don't take it too far because it could very easily be taken too far. But in the meantime, tell me in the comments below what you think of waifu culture. And what do you think about this entire thing? Do you take part in it? Do you buy the merchandise? Do you have waifus? Do you ship? Do you do all this stuff? Let me know in the comments below. And thank you all so much for tuning in. For now, I'm Connie and I'm signing off. See y'all next time.